This is Lessons Learned, and I'm your host, Matt Kennard, CEO of Better Lesson. Join me as we dig in with visionary state and district level leaders who share our mission to support every K-12 educator in developing the next generation of resourceful, compassionate, and resilient learners. Lessons Learned is brought to you by Better Lesson. Let's get started. Welcome to season 2 of Lessons Learned. And today it's a pretty exciting podcast for me. I'm a little more up than usual, a little more excited. And it's because we've got an amazing guest who's joining us today. And former high school teacher, has taught math, and has, famously taught math to kids who didn't like high school math and helped them to find their way to it. Has advocated for better math instruction on CNN, Good Morning America, Every Day with Rachel Ray. I'd love to hear more about the Rachel Ray thing, what that was like hanging out, and TED.com, and has worked with teachers internationally and in all 50 U.S. states, and was named one of Tech and Learning's 30 Leaders of the Future. Currently VP of User Growth at Amplify, also of Desmos fame, joined by Dan Meyer. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Matt. Thanks.
Well, we're really excited to get to have a chance to chat with you, on all things mathematics. We might even slip a little bit of AI discussion here at the end.
Ooh.
Love to hear your, thoughts and feelings. But I think one of the things that we love to start with everyone who's on the Lessons Learned podcast is, what is your educator journey? Like, what brought you here? Were you a second grader who knew they wanted to be in education, like one of the superintendents we introduced? Or you a late in life ed techer like me who finally realized, hey, let's go do something with some impact?
This is the spot. Yeah.
Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, great question. So I loved math as a kid, and most of my career has been spent trying to unravel a particular riddle, a particular just thorny question. And that question is, when I went to college, got my math degree, I did it quick. I had a lot of math in high school. I was pretty gifted in math at that age. I was like, I got to teach this. Like, I'm loving the school system. It's working for me. I enjoy mathematics. And I go to my first year as a student teacher in Sacramento, California. I walk into a class of 9th graders. I'm like, hey, everybody, great news. I'm here and I'm bringing with me mathematics. Isn't that awesome? Like, you've been waiting for this, right? And to watch everyone say, no, actually not into that. Not my thing. That was like, that was more surprising than it should have been. I know that I was in a lot of honors classes. I was in like a university, right? And I was not prepared for the depths of disengagement and frustration I encountered by those kids in that one classroom in Sacramento student teaching year. So the rest of my career has been trying to understand what did I find and what did so many other people find in mathematics that made it so enjoyable and useful and worthy of study that those kids and so many other kids like them did not. And that has led me to refining my own methods as a teacher, and then going to Stanford to study math education and how teachers develop, working with teachers around the world, moving into ed tech and developing tools that ideally make engaging and effective education more scalable so that more teachers can jump up the growth curve, faster. And then now into curriculum with Amplify. That's largely been my trajectory in a single question. What's the deal here? What's going on for those kids that wasn't going on for me?
I love that approach. I think that we often, when we do professional learning around student-centered mathematics in support of great curricula as well, we encounter this question, whether you're an instructional coach or a building leader, like a principal or a classroom educator, saying, I'm not comfortable with the math. I'm doing math because I'm supposed to, but I don't view myself as a math person. And I think that buildup, that myth that math is for a certain person versus a wonderful universal skill that unlocks so much, that deeply resonates. And it's something that we hear in conversation a lot, even with folks who we hope would know the unlock value that it brings. So I love to get into that. And as we talk about that, you've been on the forefront of the evolution of how we think about teaching math and connecting it to future-ready skills. And I think one of the things that's been so difficult as we talk to folks on their math journey has been helping them understand why, for instance, doing algebra might help them figure out how many eggs they can actually purchase in the future when they're at the grocery store, right? There are both practical skills, day-to-day life that require math, and then there are kind of existential needs or career needs that are also serviced by math. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we're taking math instruction and where would you like to see it continue to go to evolve to kind of the more universally accessible place that I think you were trying to bring to your kids in the classroom.
Yeah, for sure. I think that a lot of what makes math valuable for future readiness for college and career, and what makes math engaging are actually some of the same exact skills. So, for instance, what people need for these kinds of tasks and challenges you're describing, like eggs in the grocery store or whatever else, is not just the ability to make a calculation or perform an operation and get a correct answer, but it's on both sides of that to understand and think about like what operations would be useful here to do what's called the problem formulation, not just the problem solution, but the problem formulation. And then also the interpretation of that number that comes out of your calculator is also super important. Like when you divide and find out you need, 4.5 buses to carry 62 kids to the field trip, like you got to know you're talking about 5 buses, not 4.5 buses. You're not going to like go cut a bus in half, right? So there's those two sides of it. Like what kind of math do I need to do? What kind of information is important to find here? And then also, what does this number mean back in the context of my original question? Those bookends, which for a lot of people provide a lot of the satisfaction in a math class, but the locations in a math problem where I bring my own contextual knowledge, I bring my value comes in right here, not in the calculation moment, but in the interpretation and the setup moment. That's often absent. It's like we ask kids to solve these problems, get a single right answer, and then move on to the next one. But what people need in careers and what makes math so enjoyable for so many people is those moments when they bring of themselves into the math problem.
I love that. And we think about everything from assessment to instruction, right? This is why saying two jets, one taking off from Paris and London, is maybe less useful than using actual contextualized examples that we know people will have resonance with. Because to your point, math is a learned skill that's a part of a lifetime. And being able to bring yourself to it makes it more accessible and makes it more real.
Yeah, yeah.
So I love that example.
Exactly. Yeah. Just what I love about ed tech right now, what we can do with our curriculum at Amplify, and others could too, is to present problems in different ways. So whereas a lot of paper presentations, they pack a whole problem onto one page, all the numbers, info, suggestions for math skills to use here, all that stuff that just like alienates kids and says, oh, whoa, there's only one way to do this. I gotta box myself into that way. What we can do on a computer is just like present the context for a second. And so we'll just say like, hey, there's a natural disaster near you and you are running the disaster relief center where all these people will go to get their needs met. What do you need to have there? And that's all there is on the screen. And the kids can just enjoy that moment and bring of themselves to that moment. And then several screens later, we're talking about linear relationships between the number of pounds of food you need to have there and number of people there. All that kind of thing can wait until later. And that's one of the gifts that I found in technology that isn't often emphasized in our current ed tech conversation.
I think that's such a phenomenal way to think about it. And I think lots of people, when they find functional math in their career or other areas, they turn around all of a sudden this thing that they hated in high school or middle school is a super tool that unlocks for them so many different things that they're able to do personally and professionally. And so I like that idea of bringing that approach in day one to make it more fun and exciting and help people understand how you solve problems. I think one question that I have is we spend a lot of time in the classroom, but sometimes there seems like a disconnect between the amount of time spent on math and helping folks understand what that means for their career ambitions. And maybe that's a conversation about making math more relevant to student futures. Maybe that's a question of what does that mean to have a CTE pathway, but math also included? How do you think about that, that disconnect between time spent and its importance on long-term career? And maybe it's a conversation we're just not having effectively.
Yeah, it's a great question. I can tell you one way that it often tries to get solved that is ineffective, I think, is in a lot of curricula, you'll see like a career interview. You'll see a little cutout where it's like, here's this person, who's going to use this mathematics in their career. I've seen one that's like linear equations, and Jose Blanco is a translator or the translation services, and he uses this math in his career all the time. And it's meant to answer this question that students experience and ask a lot, which is, when will I ever use this? And it's just it's a really flawed, ineffective method here where, I might say to kids who are frustrated, like you could use it as a translator someday. And the kids always say back, well, I'm never going to be a translator. We have this like kind of this give and take, this back and forth. And what kids need is not to experience commercials for math's use in careers in the future, but to experience some taste of that power that you're describing now in the present. Like, it's one thing for me to say, hey, if you learn how to use algebra, your time on a spreadsheet later on in life, you can like wrap up a spreadsheet 10 times faster, 100 times faster, and get out on the golf course faster if you know how to use algebra. It's one thing to say that to them, but another to give them that experience, which we do in our curriculum, or we have kids like dragging portraits on a wall equidistant apart over and over again, and they try to set it up, and it's imprecise, and the portraits fall down because they weren't able to get precise enough. And then eventually they use a table to type in numbers, which is way more precise, but we ask them to do 50 portraits. So what do you want to do? Do you want to use type in number after number, 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, 17, 20, on and on and on and on? Or kids, do you want to use this one little formula right here that'll do all of them for you immediately? What I'm trying to say is kids need fewer commercials for math's power in their jobs later and more actual tangible experiences of math power now in their education.
I love that because I think it also helps kids understand how math skill makes them future ready, right? When you've been able to see the power of using a very simple formula that allows you to align 50 things in the time it took you to formulate the thought, now you can start to think, oh man, that's interesting. So as I get into other areas where I can see math is applicable, awesome. I understand the power of what I'm leaving behind. And maybe, I was a former banker, and we used to get, when I first started, they said, listen, you're gonna be here till 4 a.m. until you learn how to use Excel and you learn how to build a financial model efficiently. Key to that is math. It's using formulas to solve problems for yourself, so you're not sitting there trying to hand calculate things, right? The power of understanding what you don't have to do because you have this skill is such an incredible power to give kids because they actually understand the trade-off.
Great moment of empathy with kids and mathematicians is none of them want to work harder if they can just like think a little harder, save time, save energy. It's a rare moment of empathy there between the two.
As you think about the curricula that you all have at Amplify, I think it's unique that you've taken this approach of making it an experiential learning opportunity, something that I think we've tried to do but failed. What has that journey been like for you all from an experimentation perspective? And how have you, been able to build those lessons in as you continue to evolve the curricula?
Yeah, it is a lot of experimentation. It really started from some major premises, though, that weren't shared with the ed tech industry writ large when I started out with Desmos. Back then, ed tech was all about, technology. What it can do is give kids information faster. It can send them videos of explanations, and it can also evaluate them quickly, like tell them, you're right, you're wrong. Kids will love this. They'll get info, they'll answer a question, and we'll tell them they're wrong. They can answer the question again until they get told they're right. And smash cut to kids did not enjoy this, right? We found a different path, which is a couple things. One is that the technology is useful for bringing the world out there into the classroom in here, that I'm able to take digital video of a moment where I'm in the grocery store and I'm wondering which line is the fastest. And rather than talking about that with kids, I show them the lines I was in, ask, what would you choose? And then to move into some data analysis about which line's actually faster, right? But it made the math more evocative because these tools can represent the world so well through video and photo, right? And the other is that we're able to use these tools to give kids feedback on their ideas beyond right and wrong. So kids would type in answers, numbers, coordinates, whatever, and we would send them back. We'd make these illustrations, animations change according to their answers, which gives them more information, which we know is better feedback for math learning than just right and wrong. That took, a lot of experimentation, sure, but definitely some first principles about what we think these devices are good for.
It's interesting when you go down this road that you're talking about, we have this conversation when we think about an English language arts curricula or a history curricula or a social, like we want to bring the now into the curriculum. Like it's really important that if you're looking at a history book, Ronald Reagan is still the president of the United States, according to that book, right? So we think about that recency piece as really critical in some areas, but actually being able to think about illustrative examples of math, which can often be very hard to formulate in your own mind, it's actually one of the powers of the curricula. And I think it brings me to the implementation of high quality math curriculum as an issue, right? Because it's one thing to have HQIM available. It's something else to implement it with high fidelity in a classroom, because it is more pedagogically difficult than what we are used to. As you all have thought about it and you've kind of grokked your way through this problem, how do you think about HQIM from an implementation perspective? And where do you think there's stumbling blocks that districts are going through, whether it's purchasing and identifying need or thinking about that HQIM implementation?
Yeah, certainly. As the curriculum gets more pedagogically ambitious, PD, professional learning is all the more essential to think about. And so we, at Amplify, we have a product that has a digital and print component, which is exciting for me, someone who's done a lot of PD and is into the research on the digital usage. So what happens is we offer, 6-hour, 12-hour PD at the start of the school year to help people get onboarded and ramped up. But what I think we know as humans who use software outside of the school system, as individuals in general, we know that learning doesn't happen in those kinds of discrete bursts. Like it's super useful to establish vocabulary and get us on the same page for a start. But so much of that learning is going to happen in the in-service and actual usage of the curriculum. And that's where a lot of print curriculum for HQIM, it struggles because they have no way of knowing what the usage is like, what parts of the pedagogy the teacher is enacting. We have that information. Like I know what lesson people are on, how much they've used it, and even more importantly, I know if they're doing some of that ambitious pedagogy, which our platform enables. Like I know if they are selecting student responses, I know if they're presenting them, if they're using our advanced pacing and pausing tools. I've got all that coming back to me. So what I've been experimenting with to a lot of success right now is sending out an email to a teacher as they approach their next lesson. Like I don't want to just send them a lesson, an idea about, hey, here's what's important about math teaching, about inviting student thoughts and developing it, or centering student thinking. That's just too abstract at the start of the year. What I want to do instead is say, hey, you're coming up on this next lesson, graphing stories. Let me tell you what's really important about this lesson, what some student ideas that are coming up might be, and how you might try out these bigger, more abstract ideas. So I'm really excited about more ideas like that, how to help people develop through the use of the curriculum in the school year, not just in PD sessions at the start of the year.
We know that people learn one-to-many, they learn one-to-one, they learn with opportunities for asynchronous experimentation. And I think we often forget that the folks who are asking to do implementation remain human, and therefore they remain subject to human learning patterns. And, for all of those who would say, hey, we did 4 days of PD at the beginning of the year, I hope we're good. Be prepared when you go do observations to see that curriculum on the shelf. You have to be able to give folks not only the overall plan, but get into that deep planning, help them understand, at the unit and lesson level, what the goals are, and then give them actionable feedback at the right grain size, to your point, that you can get into what happens next. And I think we think a lot about that here at Better Lesson. We know Amplify, you all are of like mind. One of the things that we've also found, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is, getting into coaching, particularly for your principals and instructional leaders, not just about, hey, this is what the curriculum is, but what does it mean to think about implementation as leaders in a system is also really important, because as your principal goes, it's our theory of action is how the building goes, regardless of what a district superintendent might be saying. But you have to provide that support to remind that principal, hey, you're the instructional leader. And whether it's through instructional rounds and learning walks or, encouraging folks to try and measure and learn along the way, we have to also help leaders create the conditions for success.
Definitely. And I can remember how many times I had an administrator as a teacher who was a former math teacher. It didn't happen a whole lot. And it was always like, sweet, you understand my work a little bit better. A lot of administrators, like they oftentimes feel fearful of mathematics themselves, like a lot of the general population does. And I need administrators to understand that is an asset, not a liability. That lack of comfort, like a lot of admin walk into a secondary math class, especially saying like, well, I don't know what this math is. The teacher must be doing it right. But instead, you have a perfect point of identification with students in the class who are struggling, who that teacher needs to support as well. So just like the students, you should walk into that class and have like a really clear, objective, and driving question posed that you yourself can think about and engage with whatever your math knowledge. So that's one idea, that your fear of math might be a point of empathy also in observation and supporting teachers. I also, when I think about the kind of data that we send to administrators, I want to make sure that we are communicating ideas and beliefs about math through those oftentimes sterile data reports that other folks offer. I want in those reports to be included the kinds of explanations that students are offering at the start of the year, middle of the year, end of year. So admin and teachers and parents can see like, wow, this kid's getting more precise and more thorough in their descriptions of math ideas. To use those as opportunities to communicate math ideas in addition to who's doing what on which standard.
Yeah, it's an idea of coordinating the data exhaust, right? And using that data exhaust to both understand where you're being successful, where you need to lean in, and what needs to happen next. And I think to a certain extent, that becomes part of how you can kind of teach through your curriculum implementation. How can you understand and build that unified understanding? And I know we say this to a lot of folks. If you think you're going to have perfect implementation with fidelity in year one, you need to be a little more patient. You need to give yourself a chance to do that, but you have to set the structures by which you can think over a 2 or 3 year period. You can build that really strong implementation legacy.
Yeah, I think a lot of pedagogical models think of teachers as like just super heroic when many of them are just coming in without a content degree, perhaps, or very limited alt route like experience in classrooms. And we just need to become a lot more tolerant of a lot more teachers and put them on a growth trajectory now. Like in math class, a lot of math teachers talk about, oh, we need like low floor, high ceiling tasks for students, they call it. Like any student can come on in. And then the ones who are really accelerating, there's always room to grow. The task grows with them. And then we kind of forget about that with teachers, though, where like teachers, we also need like low floor, high ceiling tasks for teachers, where a very like new novice teacher can come in and feel some success, even with HQIM, where you don't have to be facilitating discussions day one, like a pro, but come in and just ask a question, listen to some answers from students, and then keep it moving. And I think we just present the summit, the pinnacle, and build too quickly towards that without enough patience for teachers to start at a different place and grow towards that.
One of the things that we often encourage our districts to think about are centers of excellence as well, right? How do you take advantage of those teachers who are accelerating, those superstars, to also build those observational centers of excellence to help particularly new teachers, alt cert, folks coming in, emergency cert, right? And support that idea of exemplars of great instruction. Because oftentimes when you're able to throw that out there, it both brings the temperature down in terms of the anxiety, but also gives tangible examples of what that can look like. And I love that idea too, to help support what you're saying, which is, what does it mean to do this well? And that's not a nebulous idea. You actually can start to see, oh, wow, that was a really well facilitated class. And oh, I can do that. I can use wait time. I can see if my students are reflecting the academic language that I have. And I can start to build that set of clues and understanding for myself as an educator along the way as well.
Definitely. If I could add any skill to a teacher's toolbox that would sustain them for a lifetime, is the ability to recognize the common brilliance of the math student when it expresses itself. Oftentimes, math teachers are looking for a very specific form of brilliance that looks like, a certain answer, a certain way, expressed by a person like me, when kids are behaving brilliantly constantly. And in the same way, for administrators to recognize the everyday forms of brilliance, the uncommon brilliance that their teachers are expressing in their classes, to elevate that and point to that and say like, yeah, it doesn't look exactly like what we learned about in the PD when that one developer did the thing with all of us and we were all being good and pretended to be good, but like, I saw what you're doing there. That is brilliant. Like, and to watch people respond to that, students and teachers to respond and say, oh, I've been spotted for being brilliant, and to watch what that does to a culture in a classroom or a school.
So often I think that you will resonate with this. In addition to doing obviously the normal professional learning of, one-to-many or one-to-one in-person coaching, et cetera, we often offer asynchronous tools as well. And sometimes what you really need is to see 20 minutes of a teacher just doing it well. right? I haven't done small group instruction in a while. I haven't thought about the turn and talk. I haven't thought about expressing the wait time. I haven't thought about how do I ask an open-ended question instead of a closed-ended question to help a student expose what their thinking was to get to the answer, right? In a way that might be more accessible to their peers than me talking at them. It's a brilliant idea to just give people that experiential learning, see it done well. And people resonate with that.
Especially your own site. If you, I mean, it's not asynchronous, but the more people are able to do rounds with teachers, do lesson studies, and just recognize like, hey, normal teachers like us, not just the ones in the videos or the folks that fly around and do talks, you know, kind of thing. That we're doing good work here. Also super important.
I also love that in an idea of like tightening budgets, right? These are things that you can do that don't require you to spend more money or do other things, but instead just highlight the brilliance of the teachers you already have, because you can see that brilliance expressed, and it's actually such a opportunity to turn up the volume and value of what you're doing in a way that also maximizes the resources that are on hand.
Yeah, whatever the benchmark for teachers at a site, for an admin on a walkthrough, your benchmark could be find something to share about at the next department or staff meeting, right? Like find a moment from a student or teacher that helps the whole staff both grow in their profession and also to grow as a culture.
Now I'm gonna change our topic here because Dan, you've been very vocal on the topic of AI in schools, and I would love to frame the question in two ways. But I think more than anything else, because as much as I enjoy watching Terminator and believe that Skynet, might be out there somewhere, the reality is AI is a tool, and I think it's a powerful one. And I think we're at a crossroads similar to the invention of the computer, the introduction of the internet, right? Where we're going to see seismic shifts. As you're looking today, how do you see AI as a help not only for our students but also for educators?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not doom and gloom. I'm not rapturous about the tech. I'm kind of like, it's neat. Like it's got some neat stuff. I would put it like at this point, like way south of the invention of the internet itself, as far as its potential to revolutionize classes and society. But time will tell. I will say, like the common uses I see for AI right now in education, I'm pretty down on them. Like I think it's pretty dismal. Like for instance, the before class uses, like creating instructional materials using an LLM. I just think the difference between what they make and what I could buy for a nickel on Teachers Pay Teachers is so vast. Like they just really drab, text heavy displays. Like I can't imagine myself as a teacher going into a class with some of those things. For one, the after class uses I'm also kind of down on. It's like getting feedback on my writing from an LLM. Like, no, this is relational work. I want to know what you, my teacher, thinks about this. I've got my social capital invested in you. Tell me, am I doing this well? And so I at Amplify have gotten excited about one particular use of AI, which is that AI can make sense of 30 free responses to a question faster and in some ways more accurately than I can in the classroom when I'm being bombarded by all these signals from kids. Kids have different needs. They're doing different cool things. And I can't look at these responses in the moment and make sense of them, much less turn them into the kind of discussion that is required by so many HQIM. So I've been working with my team, the AI Foundations team at Amplify, and we created this system that bolts onto our curriculum. And when a teacher's on certain screens, what they benefit from is we send student responses in a sanitized way to an LLM. And the LLM says, hey, here's what's actually going on. There's not 30 responses. There's 2. Like kids are responding with 2 different main ways. And I'm not going to give that to the teacher. Teachers don't need analysis. They don't need insight in the moment. In the moment, they need action. Something to do now. So what I've done is then taken those 2 clusters and I put them in a discussion frame that has some like narration on the side where the teacher can read it off. All right, kids, our classroom assistant has noticed something interesting on this screen. These 2 responses both have something interesting and different going on. Can we create a third response that takes the best of both responses there? That's a move. The analysis, the creation of that discussion resource, that the teacher just can't do oftentimes. I can't do it, and I'm pretty good at this in schools. And what we can't do, what the AI can't do, is facilitate the discussion. The AI can't create that social relationship through which learning happens. we leave that for the teacher to do. We give the teacher this awesome resource that isn't possible without AI in this moment. So that's what I'm excited about at the moment.
You know, I think a lot about this, and as someone who's, never failed to have an argument with someone over something along the way. I think the idea that we should be thinking about AI as a tool that gives us access to, right, many more things than we can analyze ourselves quickly, but give us directional feedback on where to head next. And to your point, help feed an action on the basis of lots and lots of exemplars versus, say, the limited exemplars we may have in our head, right? Like that's hugely valuable. I'd like to understand, if I am in a classroom, what hundreds of thousands of kids who've been confronted with this across the country, different demographics, et cetera, have done and what's been successful or not. And that is going to be more valuable than what I can necessarily see through the 100 examples that I may have in my head. And so that idea that we're using it to help prompt action on the basis of large data set analysis, or being able to help us understand thematic directional things, which, by the way, curriculum's been trying to do for quite some time, right? This is not a new thing. Like that's that power, that ability frees you up to then think about, how do you interact with your kids, right? And like the whole piece, teaching and learning remains a fundamentally human activity, but we use the tools to make ourselves able to focus on the humanity in that human activity versus the setup, the analysis, et cetera. And so I love that idea of using it to help foster a more effective communication between a teacher and a student centered around that social interaction. So I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. Teachers did not get into this job excited about putting their kids in front of laptops with chatbots and walking around yelling at them to stay off of coolmathgames.com and get back onto your conversation with your chatbot. Teachers got excited about this job for the moments that we can use AI to help them provide, which are these discussion moments where a kid sees their response on the screen, not as to punish them or critique them, but to say, hey, this is good. And this kid, this is good. Let's make something that combines what's good about both of them. And you know who's feeling good in that moment? Everybody, including the teacher, for being able to facilitate that moment with them.
Sometimes I think we have to recognize our own inhabitants in Plato's cave when it comes to new technology and new things, right? Because we can't see around the next corner, or we have limited perspective of what's going to come next. Sometimes we have to be brave enough to walk around that next corner and try. And I think the more we do that, to your point, the more we may be able to find those things that work. You talked a little about what's limiting and ineffective. What do you think it will take for AI to maybe jump some of those hurdles that you're seeing today in that pre and post class analysis and work? Or do you think this is really, we're actually going the right direction when we think about that immediate action prompting, and we need to let it breathe for a little bit?
I just think what you described as fundamentally a human relationship throughout learning is going to be very challenging for AI to resolve. Like I do not, it's possible that these AI chatbots, they take on an entirely new modality, one that can sense a lot more about what the student knows than what the student is willing to type into the current chatbot's text interface, right? And where the student has invested a whole lot more in that relationship. Like that's what needs to happen if AI is going to have a more meaningful direct to student role in their education. I walk in classes, I see kids interested in interacting with other kids or with their teacher, hopefully, but just much less so with the chatbot. And that's the core problem that advocates of that model of instruction will need to resolve.
I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think it'll be the next educational challenge we had, but I also firmly believe, like you, that when we keep the humanity in instruction, but we use the tools to enhance our own natural abilities to connect. And I'm going to go back to that word of connection. And whether that is a student connecting with their educator, or us as ed tech companies figuring out how we're connecting with the humanity behind the educators we support, right? How do we help enhance that and give people the payoff for being in that human interaction, for feeling like they're able to help support their students? Because that instinct, that ability is both a beautiful piece and actually the most powerful part of education, right? We all think about the teacher who enabled us, the educators and administrators who helped us see our potential and our future. That's a human thing. And we can go to, just since time immemorial, we can think about that fundamental human support as a critical part of education, and one I don't think we'd ever want to see go away.
Well said.
Well, I asked you what brought you here and what made you here, it brought you here to be an educator. One of the questions I love to ask, particularly now, where sometimes it feels like we're in this massive crossroads, is what gives you hope? What do you look at today and you say, I feel hopeful for the future of K-12 education. I feel hopeful for where we're headed.
Yeah, I think in many ways your sermonette back there kind of stole my answer to some degree, and that's just that I take hope in the fact that every student has in them a desire to be seen as valuable, a desire to connect with other people, to know other people, and to be known by them. They possess a spirit of creativity that oftentimes schools and systems and technologies can suppress. But I love that every kid walks into TKK, preschool, at every point wanting to know and be known and wanting to make something that expresses themselves. And all we need to do as educators, as people who care about them, is to hop into that stream of energy, powerful energy, and help them help direct that in places that the student might not have known to go. Like, hey, did you know these careers are available? Did you know that your ideas also can kind of move towards these more formal ideas with numbers and X's and Y's? But to always understand that whatever funding streams are diminished or dried up, like the stream of energy that comes from a kid who wants to be seen and see other people has not diminished at all. Like it is as strong as it has ever been, and it is there for us to tap into as energy for their education.
I love the idea that kids want to be seen as valuable, important, on a journey that matters. And, I can't think of a better way to sign off than that. Mr. Dan Meyer, thank you so much. Thank you for the thoughts, the detail. We're really excited to see where you and the Amplify team take it next. And, a thank you to the audience for listening. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share. You can find more episodes on podcast.betterlesson.com. Lessons Learned Season 2. Keep it cooking. That wraps another episode of the Lessons Learned podcast. Thank you for listening. For show notes and more about Better Lesson, please visit betterlesson.com/podcast. Lessons Learned is hosted by Better Lesson, the leading provider of data-driven, high-impact, system-wide K-12 teaching and learning solutions. We partner with states and districts to support every educator in developing the next generation of resourceful, compassionate, and resilient learners who are college and career ready. Our work has impacted more than 80,000 educators and nearly 3 million students nationwide. See you in the next episode.